Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the ChessTDD series, brought to you from a Marriott in Michigan. Apologies for any weird noises you hear from the hotel room. I'm not used to this recording environment. But anyway, so as you can see, I'm trying out Trello as per some commenter suggestions up to this point. Can't knock it till I've tried it, and a few people have suggested that I use it for this. I've used it for other things, but now here we go. 4 columns. I like the in progress. So what's on the docket today is that I'm looking at the blocking implementation for bishop, which is diagonal. Everything I've been doing up till now is adjacent. And when I was actually kind of looking at this, following out the recording of the last episode, which I did a few weeks ago, I decided that I wasn't thrilled about the implementation and I'd make some slight changes. Now, what you're seeing me do here is get a little nitpicky about the names of the test methods, because the verb in the name of this test class with this new style I'm doing is should. So should returns is not good English. It should be should return. So I made that change. Next up, I'm going to do some refactoring, which is a sort of strange thing to do right out of the gate. But if you'll recall last time, that's kind of where I left off, not being entirely thrilled about these implementations. And what I noticed as I was kind of noodling on this is that there is a problem that I'd like to tease out here with the blocked horizontal and blocked vertical. And the problem is that both methods, in order to work properly, assume that I'm passing in two things that are aligned horizontally or vertically. If not, if I were to pass in diagonal, weird stuff would happen. So what I started out with here is teasing out a new implementation of these things where I kind of wanted to simplify a little, I guess, in my mind, maybe break down this link expression a bit and get back down to primitive types, which I probably won't want to stay with. Well, I know for a fact I won't want to stay with because I recorded the code earlier, but it's not really my style to go to primitives over objects. But for the purpose of coordinate math, it's kind of easier, I guess, at least for me to reason about up front. So what I decided that I was going to do is just change the implementation here a little bit, where I start to reason more about the squares in between the two coordinates. So I'm going to call this x coordinates to check. And really, if you'll notice, I'm not doing anything a whole lot differently. It was just kind of a different way to be thinking about this approach. And when you're green, you can do this kind of moving around and shuffling of things. That's what a nice unit test suite with TDD gets you. I am not attempting to change any of the outputs of the system, so this is a refactoring, even though I'm kind of getting experimental with things here in my approach. But I'm not looking to introduce new behaviors to the system. I'm just looking to keep the existing tests satisfied. So this is a reasonable thing to be doing in the TDD world. So what I'm going to say is, and I kind of like for now the semantics here a little bit better. And I'm going to go up and I'm going to change this y coordinate to just y, because I like this, get piece for x comma y. It's very mathy looking. So I dig this for now because it's helping me to reason about this. Now, one of the advantages of recording the audio kind of right after doing this instead of waiting for a while is it's fresh in my mind what I did. And I can tell you that later I'm going to get back away from this implementation and use the board coordinate object again. But for the time being, I kind of like looking at this. It was helping me reason through what the algorithms here should be in a way that I had kind of gotten away from in the initial implementations. So looking at this the way it kind of reads more like a math problem now is helpful to me. And by all means, do things that are helpful to you for reasoning about the problem, even if they're kind of ugly or if they're not going to be what you wind up with. That's the whole idea of having this test suite, is so that you can do things like that and rest assured that things are going to continue to work. Now, there was a method to my madness as I was doing this. The reason I was kind of teasing this out and making this look a little bit different here was that I kind of wanted to get towards the concept of a path and the idea of, rather than sort of for loops and a bunch of iterating around, I wanted to kind of gravitate towards just a collection of squares that would be between my origin and destination. And I wanted to check those squares. Now, there's not a lot of readable difference in between the code. I'm kind of reorienting myself, but that's kind of the more domain-oriented concept that I'm going here. I don't want to get lost too much in math, and that's part of the reason that I'm going to go back away from having these primitive types as parameters. There are more of them. It's not pretty, but it sure looks like a math problem, as I just said. So now I'm kind of redoubling my efforts here on the is vertical path blocked. I'm going to go with a pretty much identical implementation and then refactor the is blocked method to use this particular refactoring that I'm doing, or this new method I'm adding, I should say. So usually I'm reasonably true to form about not doing any copying and pasting, so I'm retyping what I'm retyping the same basic implementation here, just with the coordinates switched as appropriate. I do believe I do a tiny bit of copy and paste for filling in some signatures later. I tend to be reasonably pragmatic and not a purist, and even though I don't think it's a good idea, we're all probably guilty of it at one time or another, I try to keep it to a minimum, try to force myself to feel the pain of typing things out so the pain of duplication is real and I avoid it. So for the time being here, I'm going to keep up with this same pattern of refactoring, and then I'm going to use it in as blocked where the original is commented out, and I still have the old method, so if this all kind of blows up, I have a pretty easy path back to where everything was green. So now I have to kind of go here, and it's a little more verbose with passing in the actual integer values, and now that I have done this, I say, uh-oh, things are red. What kind of stupid thing am I doing? And I realized, I think fairly quickly, that the stupid thing I was doing was not being true to the original way that enumerable.range works, so I need that at least +1. I'm going to put it in both places for consistency, and everything stays green, so we're good there. So now that everything's green again, I like this new way of doing things a little bit better. So I'm going to just delete these old methods, and I'm going to be happy with what's there. And now you might say it's programming by coincidence a bit for me to just say, oh, well, I probably need that off by one thing. To me, one of the beauties, and I might even write a blog post about this later, one of the kind of beauties of the approach of TDD is that you can do a little tweaking that way and feel pretty good that if everything's green, you're probably doing the right thing. Now, is that programming by coincidence? Perhaps a touch, I don't know. But I'm adding in that thing because I think it might be the right thing to do. Everything goes green. I feel pretty good about it. But you know what? If I'm not sure, rather than kind of squinting at the screen for a while, I start to write more tests of things that, if everything's not good, I'm going to be exposed. So I'm not doing that right at the moment. Actually, at the moment, I kind of took a turn here to refactor the names of these methods again to be grammatically correct. But what I would do later, and I'll certainly get around to, probably in a post in this series where I'll do a more outside-in kind of BDD holistic style of test, where I flesh out a lot of different test cases. And maybe even before that, once I've got blocking squared away so much, or at least I think I've got it squared away, then I'll start to do things like perhaps see what happens on an edge case, like trying to move the piece by 1 space, or trying to move it by 0 and see how it behaves. Do things like that. That's where kind of TDD gets you around off by 1 errors without you really needing to kind of jot things down on a pen and paper and scratch your head and all that. If you get everything green, that's a good sign. If things continue to behave in the red-green refactor cycle as you want them to, that's an even better sign. And then kind of at the end, as you're writing edge case tests, you can be pretty confident that's what your test suite gives you. So what I'm doing here is after this refactoring and sort of wrapping my head back around the way things were working, now I've realized that I'm going to be able to expose a problem this way, where I'm checking horizontal and vertical movement for blocking. And what I'm doing now is I'm saying that, so if I put 2 pawns diagonally in front of the bishop from, remember this particular class I'm in, if you can't read that because I don't think I had it far enough, this is the chessboard set up with just the sort of non-pawn pieces in the first row. So what I've done in this test is saying after blocking pawns are added is I've put 2 pawns that would block the bishop and make it so that the bishop would have no moves. But now when I'm saying, hey, there shouldn't be any moves coming back for this bishop, that's not the case. There are moves coming back from the bishop. So I had kind of formed a plan as I was coding here of how to tease out with red to get new behavior in here. And the new behavior I want is to only be checking for horizontal blocking if I am passing in a horizontal move, and same thing with vertical. Now, I had no way to really get at that from a behavior standpoint without writing a test that would expose this, and I needed to have my head a little bit better around what horizontal and vertical blocked path we're doing in order to make that happen. So what I'm doing now is I'm saying, okay, the cases I've handled so far, I'm dealing with pieces that will move vertically and horizontally. So I have this third path now, the bishop. None of this applies to bishop. So I've guarded all of the rook's stuff with if conditions, and now I've got a third condition that only the bishop is going to hit. So I can do something dumb here, and once I fix the compiler, I can just say, yeah, return true, because right now the only test case I have for bishop is where I've blocked it, and there should be no moves. So I'm basically in is blocked when it comes to the bishop, which is the else path. I'm just saying, yeah, it's always blocked. And this is kind of I think maybe an intermediate use of TDD, where you're kind of nibbling around the problem. And I'm saying, like, I don't know exactly how I'm going to implement is diagonal path blocked. That's a little more complicated than horizontal and vertical. But I do know of a problem that I can expose that I need to solve. And I do know that I can solve it by, at least for the moment, returning true here. And I also know the next test I can write, which is to put a bishop on the board that shouldn't be blocked, because the next thing that's going to happen is that's going to fail when I write that test. So I've got a good path here to start teasing out the bishop, the diagonal implementation. So that's the next test I'm going to go over and write. And I can't remember. Yeah, I did a bit of refactoring so that I'm working towards a pattern here where, so as you can see, I'm getting back to my original board coordinate implementation with these new methods. And I think this is the point at which I go back to for these methods. Because what I've got here, and I'd argue that there's a bit of a method to my madness, is I'm kind of fleshing out this idea of if this is a horizontal move, then see if a horizontal path is blocked. If it's a vertical move, see if the vertical path is blocked. What I'll probably look at doing, although I don't do it in this installment, is then even maybe folding the check to see if it's a vertical or horizontal path into the is horizontal or vertical path blocked methods, and then maybe just have kind of a list of lambdas or something that I run through, maybe some kind of chain of responsibility. I don't know. We'll see. Right now it's all sort of obtuse, and the diagonal path block algorithm looks quite stupid, just returning true. There's another thing that's going on here too, which is, and I haven't done anything about it yet, but this is something to note just for your own sake. The fact that I want to do a lot of testing of this is blocked method is something of a smell that TDD teases out. So I'm really not interested in looking at all at this get moves from. What I'm really looking at entirely is this is blocked method. So I've got this path of indirection where I'm testing all these things about get moves from, but it's all the churn that's going on in is blocked. And that tells me, especially now as I'm watching myself code this, that maybe it would be worth thinking about breaking that out into another class that I can test directly. And, were I not flying solo and pairing on this might be somebody that a pair sitting next to me would look at and say, hey, maybe we should take a step back here. I've had this kind of weird experience of doing the coding and then recording the audio for this has been sort of eerily like pairing with myself. Anyway, here comes the next test that's going to expose the problem. And as I was writing this, I forgot what I wanted to do, which was make things simple by just putting one of those blocker pawns on there, which would lead to a scenario where I just had one diagonal path from start, off to the right on the board. So I put that in. I don't know if adding more failure to a failing test is a strict violation of TDD. Off the top, I think it probably is. So, oops. I think there was also a point earlier where I did a little bit of just a tiny extract refactoring when the test was read. Neither of these is probably the greatest practice. We all slip from time to time. So even though I do this day in and day out and I live and breathe this stuff, I mess it up from time to time. So don't feel bad if you do, or if you're having trouble learning. Probably takes a lifetime to get close to not messing it up. And even after a lifetime, you still probably mess things up more regularly than you'd like to admit. But, sooner or later we get there. So is diagonal path blocked is the next thing I want to implement here, and then I'll call this from the else condition there. And maybe I should have written this inline in that method instead of going right down here. I don't really view that as a problem. To me, it's the simplest thing to go down here and kind of continue this path of these methods, and to have sort of a separate place where I'm in. Oh, apparently I forgot C# there. Int parent, yeah. I think I was going for a for loop. Yeah, there we go. To have this down here defined, to me, this is simple in the sense that I'm going to write this algorithm down here where I can kind of focus and I'm not distracted by the conditionals in that method up there. I think this is probably a fine way to go about things. There will be times where just inlining stuff is not really obvious to you, and the simplest thing you can do to get it to pass is sort of a subjective concern where, the idea is don't go implementing the world, don't go gold plating, don't go distracting yourself. But it can be distracting to write, dumb code inline at times if your brain's not really working that way. And I found it nice to have a clean canvas down here where I was implementing something that I knew would make both of these tests pass, and then I would just call that thing right after writing it. So what I'm doing here is saying that I want to figure out between the origin and the destination, I want to figure out what the difference is, and that's going to be the number of vertical moves. So what I'm going to do from there, or I should say, the number of horizontal moves, but it will also be the number of vertical moves because that's the nature of the diagonal movement of the bishop, 1 over 1 up. So I have a case where if you're looking at a 4-quadrant graph, I'm doing x plus 1, y plus 1. So my idea here is just to say, okay, well, how much does x change in the course of this move? And then we'll iterate through that number and check the piece that's incremented by that many, both x and y, if that makes sense. So, diagonal 1 over 1 up, diagonal 2 over 2 up, etc. Now, something strange has happened here, and I don't remember exactly what caused this, but I've made the test I just wrote pass, but I've experienced a regression with the other one. Oh, and I know why this happened, and I was getting sort of toward the end here, so I did something quick and dirty and ugly, although I didn't go full-blown copy and paste, but quick, dirty, and ugly to make it true. So the problem was, even though I made this second test that I had written, see, I wanted to copy and paste there, and I slapped my own hand. Even though I had wanted to make things simple, I need to check 2 paths, the quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 path, because the first test I wrote with 2 blockers will only be true if both paths are blocked. So you see me here swap origin and destination because that's the way that this is going to work. In the case of the blocking piece to the left of the bishop, your destination is actually going to be smaller than your origin. So you can see what I'm doing here is not probably greatest, but I'm saying, okay, let's, in this case, walk -1x and +1y, and then I'll not, I reused the variable. Okay, so I was running out of time here. I am running out of time. This is getting to be a long segment. I have passing tests. I've implemented blocking bishop. It's ugly. It has problems. I'm going to move this card to done, and then I'm going to stress and move to the top a card here that says, hey, this is pretty ugly. You're not done with bishop. This is kind of like what's going on. If you're sort of in the middle of something and, your boss comes over and needs some kind of report, or you have to go to a meeting or something. And I'll stump for TDD yet again here. The beauty is that I've got this sort of trail of breadcrumbs to pick up where I left off, both in terms of the Trello board and in terms of tests in the code. TDD makes it easier to deal with interruptions. So I don't think I did anything more of substance here. I just kind of looked around. Next time we'll get things fixed. and hopefully get bishop blocking and all that will look a little bit better. Sorry, I kind of ran out of video there, and thanks for watching.